Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today we've got another video for you from North Atlantic Ship Repair at Drydock 3 in the Philadelphia Navy Yard. Today is Easter Sunday, March 31st, 2024, and today we got our first look down in the dry dock. The dry dock is still wet. There's about a foot of water in it because most of the shipyard workers took off today. A lot of mud comes into the dry dock along with the water when they're flooding it. And before we start doing tours of the dry dock, we're going to hose it down and wash all that mud out of the way so that we're not slogging through sticky, stinky mud. So rather than pump the dry dock all the way down today and then let that mud get hard and be harder to get out of there tomorrow when the workforce comes back to start doing that job, we're leaving a little bit of water in there to keep that mud hydrated, and then tomorrow it'll all get blasted out, and then we'll be ready to start doing tours this upcoming weekend, April 6th. So, because I don't like standing ankle deep in cold river water and stinking mud, today's video we're going to be talking about the keel blocks. From up here on the wall of the dry dock, we can see a couple that weren't used. The original blocking plan for the ship calls for 429 keel blocks. Interestingly, American and European keel blocks come in different sizes. So the imperial keel blocks are measured out at, typically they're 42 by 48 inches, which is what you see here. This is a typical 4-ton keel block. The original plans called for 411 of these, along with 11 that are 20 by 48, 4 that are 42 by 36, and 3 that are 42 by, that's probably 30, it could be 38. Anyway, with this number of keel blocks, it means that there's about 5,500 square feet of the ship's bottom that are sitting on blocks, which equates to about 950 tons of ship sitting on each square foot. And that's the key. The keel blocks are there. Battleship New Jersey has a flat bottom. So in theory, you could sit her straight on the sill of the dry dock, and that would probably disperse her weight over the greatest area. However, you can't paint the underside of the ship. And one of the reasons for today's video is the sheer number of questions we've gotten about how we paint the part of the ship that sits on these blocks. And that's a good question. We've talked about it in the past. But honestly, this project is generating so much interest. We've got a lot of viewers coming to us for the first time who haven't heard us talking about that. So, about 5,500 square feet of the ship sits on these blocks in the shipyard. Once we've finished blasting and painting everything that is accessible, we're going to refloat the ship, move her exactly 4 feet, and then set her back down again. Normally, you would bump the ship aft 4 feet, and she actually has 3 different blocking positions. So in theory, because of those 429 keel blocks, you could bump her aft twice to get the entire underside of the ship. However, because of how some of our through-hull openings were blanked over and where those fell in the blocking plans, it looks like we're going to have to go forward. The good news is we only have to fleet the ship one time. We only have to give her one bump to hit everything. Part of that reason is because we did not use 429 keel blocks. By using fewer keel blocks, it means that we don't have to bump the ship as much, not as much of the ship's surface area is being covered. The good news about that is when we initially reached out to the shipyard and sent them our blocking plan, there was a lot of concern on their part because they don't have 429 keel blocks to set the ship on. They haven't dry docked an Iowa-class battleship since 1967. So they just didn't have what they needed, but they started to do some math, and fortunately USS Missouri provided us with their blocking plan from their 2009 dry docking in Pearl Harbor, in which they only used 306 blocks. And so the docking master here, the marine engineer, they started looking at these documents and they found a real simple solution. You have to have a certain number of blocks so that all of the weight of the ship is not being transferred through a small area and then down into the floor of the dry dock. The floor of the dry dock can't support all of the weight being concentrated in small areas. So by using larger blocks than 42 by 48, but still only putting a 42 by 48 square of cribbing on top. That means that the ship's weight is being transferred down into this cribbing, which is then being transferred down into a larger surface area that's then going down into the floor of the dry dock. And so that is allowing the ship's weight to be distributed over a larger number of area than the number of blocks would seem to suggest. It was a brilliant solution come upon by the marine engineer and our salvage master, and we actually got it down to 304 blocks, of which the ship is currently only sitting on 302. Fortunately, with our ballast water, we sit somewhere around 47,000 tons total displacement, so we're about 10,000 tons lighter than the ship could be dry docked at, than her max weight. And so that gives us even more wiggle room with the number of blocks and the weighting of the ship. While the bases are these concrete blocks, you'll notice that there are caps on them that are made out of this soft wood. That's going to allow the ship to crush down on it some, which will prevent the blocks from crushing up into the ship's shell plating. This also allows us to shape this otherwise flat block to fit the curve of the hull. Now, Iowa-class battleships are relatively flat-bottomed for most of their length, but there were some places where we had to cut out the cribbing for the blanks and other fittings to fit right. And on many ships, there are some places where it calls for this to be cut at an angle to better match the mold of the hull. Notice that this cribbing on these blocks that weren't used is not held down at all, which means when they flood the dry dock, these will just float off. So the ones that are actually down in the dry dock have metal bands that go around them, and you can sort of see the imprint of that band here, and then another one here from overspray from the paint. So those metal bands hold the cribbing to the blocks, and they give you a great visual indicator. When the ship sits on it, this wooden cribbing gets crushed down some, which means that the band is going to bow out. A little bit of bow is a good thing. They're designed for that. But if you see this completely flattened and a massive amount of bowing, that's a great indication that there's too much weight on these blocks, and maybe we have to bring more blocks in and put them in place. There are lots of different ways to block ships depending on your type of dry dock and the weight. Texas's was a little bit different than ours. Ours is a pretty traditional method here. This is a pretty old dry dock. And that's been one of the coolest things about this process. This dry dock was made in, I think, 1921 off the top of my head. And they're doing things here the same way that they've been done for over 100 years. So we've brought our historic vessel into a historic dry dock where they're using some historic techniques to do the maintenance work on the ship. We get to watch these shipyard workers doing the exact same type of work that has been going on here for 5 generations. If you want a chance to see all of this in person, remember that we are selling tours of the dry dock on weekends while the Battleship is here in April and May. There's a link in the description below where you can get your tickets. We're limited on how many folks we can take into the dry dock at any given time, and we're limited to daylight hours on non-working days. So there is a finite number of slots to take these tours. Make sure you get yours today. What are some other questions about dry docking you'd like to see us cover in future videos? Let us know in the comment section down below, and we'll create some content of that. Hopefully our next couple of videos we'll actually take down in the dry dock ourselves, and we'll be able to keep our feet dry while we do it. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. It's what's allowing us to do this project. There's a link in the description below if you'd like to donate to support the ongoing dry dock efforts on Battleship New Jersey. You can also support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.